So, welcome back. This is episode 50. We finally made it. Lauren is not on with us today because we have a very special guest, and his name is David Brooks. Was really excited and thankful to get him here to talk to all of our families, to kind of really go into the details about why what we do is so important when we talk about Roth conversion and Medicare planning. And David, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
So, David Brooks here. I am a financial advisor and planner, 26 years in the business, and was a Floridian for a long, long time. Actually started my career in downtown Orlando at Payne Weber, one of the old wirehouses that does no longer exist. That was back in the 1990s, so putting some age on me here. In fact, by the way, Adam, I just so you know, in preparation for this, I went back and watched several episodes of your podcast, and you mentioned in one you were born in like 1981, like when I'm going into high school, and I'm just like, son of a. I'm like, okay.
We look the same age, though, David. You know,
Well, I say you don't have as much gray in the beard as I do, right? So
I just discovered just for men. My 3-year-old son, my wife asked him what color daddy's hair was, and he said white. So I figured it was time, you know.
I want to do a full disclosure. I did used to use that product, but it started to turn my skin, and I just let it go. And of course, I just like, well, you know, for this business, it's probably good if I look older. So I just let it roll. And now it's that natural gray everywhere, right?
That's right.
But anyway, yeah. So I've been in this business a long time, but I've kind of become known as the guy to talk taxes with, right? And so I've been blessed to train. We're approaching about 500 advisors I've now trained in my career on the importance of taxation and taxation planning, proper distribution planning, and understanding how your clients, these folks that have been doing everything they've told to do right to save up for retirement, but we've all done it wrong if we've just followed the herd. And by the way, I love the book title. You know, you've been lied to. That is so great, your book, because that's exactly right. You've been told this myth that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire, when that's 4% of the people I talk to. That's true. And those are not our typical clients, because the reason they go to a lower tax bracket is, unfortunately, they don't have anything. They haven't saved anything, or they have very little saved for retirement. But people have done the hard work, made the self-sacrifices, saved their nest egg up, and it's very common today. I remember when I was a kid, $1 million was a big number. But today, I mean, there was just a study put out by Morningstar. The average American realized they need $1.46 million to have a retirement. Now, that number is higher or lower depending where you live, and that's not going to suffice if you're living in you know, San Francisco or something. But I'm in the Midwest, that's a realistic number that a lot of our clients are going to be fine with. But we deal with, we call it Midwest millionaires. My clients out here in the Midwest, I live in Nebraska for those listening on Adam's side of this podcast. So I'm out in the Midwest. People, blue collar, work hard, work their whole lives. We deal with white collar, blue collar. Grind, save, pay off their debts. My clients walk in, they don't have any debt, or they have very little debt left to their name. Where now my practice was in Florida prior. So I had offices over in Vero Beach on the other coast, and up in Melbourne, Florida for years. And, you know, my son still lives there, own a lot of real estate in Florida, have a lot of family in Florida. We love Florida, but we moved out here 7 years ago and started over. And, you know, clients in Florida that I dealt with on a regular basis, especially in Vero Beach, very high account values, high net worth, but just as high a debt. I mean, they would walk in with $4 million saved for retirement, but have $2.7 million in debt. So that their net worth was really only $1.3 million, about the same thing we see here, except here they just come in with the assets without all the debt. And so one of the things I always talk about is people need to understand, just because you have money in your account doesn't mean you have it. And so you have to manage both sides of the balance sheet, assets and liabilities. But if you're blessed to have gotten rid of the debt, Adam, then the problem is, do you have a secret partner in your accounts, right? We're business owners, and I joke about it all the time. The value of a business grows, and I've started over 40 businesses in my career. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I was in the restaurant industry in Central Florida years and years ago. This is going back 80s and 90s, and a very tough business, by the way. But we grew that very successful. It was a multi-million-dollar operation back in the 90s, and was very successful as a young man. But through personal pain on the taxes and the liabilities and things that I was not prepared for, not coached on, not told by my advisory teams, the accountant and the financial advisor. I was just getting a guy helping me make trades was my financial guy, and this was what it was. I paid him commission to buy and sell stuff. And my accountant just told me what I did, gave me a history lesson in numbers of stuff in the past. And so I've gone through some personal pain, which is how it got me to become so passionate about taxation and understanding it's the number one expense that our clients are going to face in retirement. Number one. Number two, by the way, is healthcare, Adam. And most financial advisors don't do holistic planning. They just, hey, I got some great investment ideas for you. That is not financial planning. That is investment management. And that is one piece. So, one of the things I always joke about when clients are like, well, I bill my guy at, Merrill or Morgan or whoever, and nothing against these firms. The guys mean well, but they typically, the guy or gal that they're working with has just been helping them with the investments, and that's it. And I'm like, well, let me ask you a question. How'd you get comfortable paying a full fee when you're getting one of 5 areas covered with this person? And it's
kind of like an problem.
Yeah, it's an aha moment.
We tell everybody there's nothing wrong with a fee, essentially, right? Everybody has to be compensated, but
we're a for-profit organization. Let's be clear, right? And we couldn't operate. I can't take care of my employees, which I have over 3 dozen now, and I'm a lot of responsibility. So we will operate on a profit margin, and any business should. And so anyone that thinks that you should work for free, next.
Right. I think the big issue with us when we talk about a fee, and we tell this to every family we sit down with, our job in our industry, and by the way, we've talked about this before. I hate the term financial advisor. I prefer to say private wealth manager. You and I have had these conversations, but when we talk about our business, especially with the stigma that's around it, because a lot of people end up with a Merrill, a Morgan, a retail organization, and they're a little more limited. The problem with all of that is we need to be able to provide 10 times the value of the fee that we're charging just to make up for a lot of the mistakes that all of these other families might have seen, right? And it's interesting because you talk about the importance of the Medicare planning. And I was wondering, I wanted to pick your brain about this. We've got a lot of families that become concerned about the Medicare surcharge, right? And my way of explaining that to them is Medicare surcharge is if you go over that income limit, which this year is $206,000, right? For a married couple, if you go over that income limit, you might pay more for your Medicare, especially if you're doing a Roth conversion. But the reality is the Medicare surcharges have not gone down every year. They continue to rise. And something you said that was really interesting is they rise at 7% per year. You want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, so B and D, if you go back history since they've been implemented, all right, and we got over 60 years of data now on this. So B, one of them rises, and forgive me if I'm backwards here, so I'm paraphrasing, but one rises at about 7.3%, and one at 6.48%. So the average of those two together is about 6.9% inflation on those penalties. So last year was 5.9% for Medicare B. That was the jump that you paid, right? So we went from like $164 to $174.10 or whatever it is this year for your standard payment. And then what we have to get people to understand is exactly there's 5 lines in the sand. You go past that, as you mentioned, the 206 range for a married couple, half that if you're single. Now you're going to add on $80 a month in penalties. These are taxes. That's 2 taxes. And so one of the things I always talk about, depending on what state you live in, you could pay 8 or 9 taxes on one distribution from your IRA if you're blessed to save up. And so I always tell people, if you've got $1 million in your IRA and you're age 62, you have a major IRMAA problem no one's told you about, period. And it's only going to get bigger. Now, here's the thing, and Adam, this is one of the things you and I, before we started the podcast today, we're talking about. We do these trainings for advisors on this very topic, and you're probably going to head out here in a few months to get some of this stuff. But if you have, like we just had somebody in here, they have $3.8 million in their IRA, they're 66, plan on working another 2 years, as a lot of folks, and by the way, one of your podcasts, you're like me, I don't think everyone want to retire, because what would you do if retirement is doing what you want to do when you want to do it. So I still want to do this.
So,
amen, brother.
I have
It's
more
not
money
work.
yeah, it's exactly
not
right.
work.
So
But if people have been blessed to save that kind of money up in the wrong account, that qualified bucket, 401k, 403b, 457, IRA, whatever it is, it's yet to be taxed, and you keep pushing it out to RMD, required minimum distribution age, which is now, if you're born at 1960 or later, it goes all the way to 75, and people think, oh, this is great news. No, it's not. You're going to pay about 40% more in taxes than those that start RMDs at 70 and a half, because your account's going to continue to grow. And so you're going to to take bigger distributions out, pay more taxes, but it's not just the tax on the distribution. Now, you're blessed in Florida, so I'm assuming most of your clients are in Florida. I have several clients in Florida, but Florida, you don't have a state income tax. We do. So we have a state income tax of almost 7% here in Nebraska. Actually, it's under 6% this year. We did get a reduction. We're 5.84, and that includes any retirement income. So our clients not have to pay the Fed tax, but then they have to pay a Nebraska state tax. Now, our neighbor state across the river, just across our river here, is Iowa. And so we have a ton of clients in Iowa, and Iowa does not tax retirement distribution. So big advantage if you live across the river. That's 6% savings on those distributions or Roth conversions. So we help clients understand where they live, the geography, the taxation of each state they live in. We have a lot of snowbird clients, et cetera. Our snowbirds go to Texas and Phoenix area more often than Florida from this area. But it doesn't matter. These states, we need to understand where you're going to live part of the year and what the taxation is of each of those states. And then we do all the computations to help them understand why we'd want them to be a resident of one state over another. And of course, it's not just the taxes, it's the healthcare costs. In Nebraska, we're blessed to have very inexpensive Medicare supplement policies compared to you. Like a Plan G where you are is about $350 for the same plan that only costs about $120 here. So
crazy how that works. You know, we have the higher deductible plans now. We used to have the higher deductible Plan F. And that's how crazy this is, right? The higher deductible Plan F, even if you needed to use the deductible and the max out of pocket, was still less than if you would have paid the monthly premium on the regular.
Yeah, both my parents are on those. My dad's actually on a J prior to even F, so it's been a long time since J Brown, but my mom has a high deductible F. And it's like $2,200 out of pocket a year, but her premium's like $71 a month. So she has a great plan that even with the $2,000 out of pocket, which guess who pays it? But anyway, if that happens, it's still cheaper than buying her a traditional plan. Like I said, and a lot of people don't know that Medicare, your supplemental premiums and the Medicare Advantage plans that are offered in your area, we do a whole training on those. They're tied to the outcomes of your local hospitals, right? So the grades and the outcomes of those hospitals directly derive the expense and cost of those plans. So at Florida, you guys have, now it could have changed. I haven't lived there in 7 years, but you had 3 zones, if I remembered. So you had South Florida, you had Central Florida, which is where my clients were, and you had North Florida. North Florida was much cheaper, the zones you had for your Medicare supplements. But South Florida, where you guys are, anywhere, especially over in Miami, those plans were 3 times what they are up here in Nebraska when I moved here. So that's got to go in the equation too, because I have clients, hey, should I move to Florida because I won't pay state income tax? And we actually do the calculations based on what they're getting for healthcare. I'm like, actually, you'll save, $1,200 in income tax, but you're going to pay $5,400 more for Medicare. So maybe not, But again, you got to have a holistic planner that understands all the parts integrate together in a true holistic plan. It's not just investment advice; it's planning advice. It's proactive planning advice. And then, like the main thing we're talking about today, the taxation of those things, you got to factor that in, because that one distribution, that one RMD from that multi-million-dollar IRA will create IRMAA A, IRMAA B for the person who took the distro. If they're married, IRMAA A, IRMAA B, or a B and D, for both, right? And then if you're in a state like me, a state income tax. So, and then on top of that, Social Security. If there was no other distributions, your Social Security is now taxable when it wouldn't have been. So there's 8 taxes right there on one distribution. And with IRMAA accelerating, and our software will share this with folks, with IRMAA accelerating, we have people that their Social Security is gone by age 88. Now, Adam, this is going to blow you away. A lot of advisors are not aware of this is what's coming. The IRMAA penalties and the cost projected, and this is right from Congressional Budget Office, is so big, your Social Security is wiped out. A $3,000 Social Security is gone, because that's what you're paying to access Medicare 15 or 18 years in the future when these distributions from the IRAs get so big. And people have no idea that they're forced to take $500,000, $600,000 RMDs on these accounts, and they're at the max tax bracket. And of course, again, we try not to get political. I always talk about I don't really care about party or person.
They're all crooks. That's what I said.
Yeah. Well, I care about policy, right? And so what I care about is the policy that the person will either vote for or will legislate or enact themselves, and how will that affect my constituents and how will it affect my family? That's what I'm caring about. So, people get all worked up on politics, and I get it. I mean, even in my own family, we have some heated conversations, if you will. But what we care about is understanding, look, our government has a spending problem. $34.7 trillion as of today. That's over $250,000 per taxpayer, that we're on the hook for. And our interest expense right now, and the Fed inflation is reaccelerating as we speak, right? So we've been talking about this for a while. There's no rate cuts coming this year. Acceleration of inflation, looking under all look at copper, by the way. Just pull up a chart of copper. Copper is a great indicator where inflation is. Dr. Copper, as we call it, is firing up. And so inflation is coming back. The Fed is getting themselves caught in between a rock and a hard spot. And we could end up in 1980s version where we had inflation come down and then they didn't finish it off. And then it went back and we had to take Paul Volcker took interest rates all the way up to almost 20%. People forget this and how high they can go to get that genie back in the bottle. Well, with our government funding debt, they have to fund $8 trillion in the next 12 months. They have to refinance that, plus new debt they're bringing out at these higher rates. And if rates go even higher, and the market is saying BS to the Fed's mantra, oh, we're going to soften rates. Well, if that were true, the market would be pricing lower yields, and they're not. The 10-year is still up close to 4.5%. And so we have to refinance this debt at our current rate, Adam, just with what Janet Yellen has said she will finance this year with no additional spending, no recession, no new good stuff going to Ukraine. We are going to spend $1.3 trillion on interest alone. It is now going to be the single highest budget item in our federal government. And that is insane. And that's the biggest worry I have. And what I tell clients they should be voting on is who's going to tackle the debt, regardless of Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green Party, I don't care. Who's going to get serious and have big boy pants on and reduce the debt? And the way they're going to do that, just so you know, is through higher taxation and austerity measures. This is just
the only way they can.
It's data. So we will cut benefits to people that receive benefits in multiple forms, and it's not just Social Security. It's everywhere. Veterans benefits, Social Security trimming on the COLA adjustments. By the way, they just adjusted CPI again this past month. They threw out vegetable oil, coffee, cocoa. All that's no longer calculated. By the way, coffee, I'm a coffee nut. I drink, 20 cups a day. I'm a coffee insane person. Coffee's up 73% since last Labor Day. That's insane, right? And inflation's under control. BS. If you go back, now I'm going to age you here, bud. When you were born, I believe you said 1981, if I remember listening to your podcast, right?
That was last year. That was the last year. When the year I was born, we had 3 prior years before that a double-digit inflation, and it finally went down the year I was born.
Well, here's the thing, though. The way that we calculated inflation the year you were born, if you use that exact same formula today, inflation, you ready for this? 18.3% last 12 months. You see, they keep changing how they create the calculation so that they can make you think the number is lower. Now, why might they be incentivized to do that? Well, all military pay raises, Social Security raises, Medicare, all these things are tied to these COLA adjustments. And so if they can suppress that number, that's less money they would spend on said benefits, right? Or Social Security COLA raises, et cetera. So there is a major incentive to suppress what inflation is being reported as. And so, even with the suppression that they're doing, we're seeing reacceleration in inflation. And now we do a lot of modeling in our office. We do a lot of Our model shows 4.07% inflation in Q4. Right. And so that's a problem for the Fed. That's it's 100% over their goal, their stated goal. So do you think they really can lower interest rates? Now, I will tell you, maybe they do because of refinancing all that debt. There's enormous pressure to get rates lower so they can try to refinance some of this debt. So ultimately, I do think rates end up getting cut at some point. But the problem for you and I and for our families and that we're trying to help and for the listeners of this podcast is, listen, that's not going to get it done. They have to go get assets, and they're going to get them in a couple of ways. And like I said, through trimming benefits and across the board, governments will have to cut, what they're spending, and then higher taxation. And who are they going to tax? Well, I wish they tax everybody. Fair would be fair.
Who has the money?
My tax. Well, yeah, I'm saying just.
If you want to raise my tax rate 3%, right, from 37 to 40, fine. Take the person that's at 0 and take them to 3%, right? Let's make it a fair move so we can get. But this nonsense that we're only going to tax the top 10% or so, tax the rich, this mantra, you can confiscate the wealth of every billionaire in the United States, and there's less than 1,000 of them, just so you know. Well, I don't know, NVIDIA's earnings report, maybe there's more than 1,000 as of this week, right? But there's about 1,000 billionaires in the United States. If you confiscate 100% of their wealth, Warren Buffett's just down the street, just take it all, you can run the government for less than 180 days. And then what are you going to do? Right? And so people need to understand is capitalism, while not perfect, and I have a 28-year-old who lives in Florida, argues with me on certain things, and let's just face it, younger generations.
Oh, you have one of those too. You have one of those too. I do as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's coming of age, paying his own way. He actually graduated college last year. He took a while to get there, but he works in radiology. He works in a hospital in Florida. He's got a great career. He's really enjoying it, and he's starting to become aware of what things cost, taxes he's paying because he's making real money now. And so it's amazing how this self-awareness kind of gets people to start to think about things and say, don't get it political, son. Just think about how it affects you. Taxes on your car, right? Like here in Nebraska, we pay called a wheel tax. It's an insane amount. Yeah. You have to pay extra money just to register your car every year. So it's so there's certain expenses here that are extremely outrageous. Like in Florida, tagging my car was like $60 a year, right? Here, I've got a couple of nicer vehicles, but it's north of $5,000 a year to register my car. Okay,
that's ridiculous.
Yes.
David, I want to jump in. I want to jump in with something you said, because I like to try and keep it high level. You are nothing short of brilliant when you talk about these numbers and the data. For me, you probably know this. I have a theater degree, an English literature degree, and a degree in master's degree in secondary education. So I'm not even supposed to be on this podcast with you. But the reality is, somebody explained this to me once, and I felt really good about it until I thought about the numbers. Everybody knows, if you have a $2 million house, but your income justifies it, it's not a strain on you because your income justifies the fact that you have a $2 million house. But when we think about our country as a whole, if there's $34 trillion in debt, right, and we wake up and there's an $8 to $12 million deficit, if all of our debt was called, and this was last year's numbers, if all of our debt was called and every individual American was responsible for covering that debt, the collateralized, the secure, the unsecure, the number last year was $654,000 per person just to cover all of that debt. None of that adds up to me as, yes, we can afford this $2 million house when we're already in the hole $500,000 before we get out of bed, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense, this whole idea of debt to income ratio. Do you kind of agree with that? Because it would seem like the government in that vein is kind of pulling one over our eyes as well. You mentioned how they change calculations. Well, they can change loan to value and all those numbers. It just doesn't seem right to me.
No, absolutely. And there's different ways you can calculate that. And that 650 number you're referencing includes all not just the 34 trillion in debt, that includes the unfunded liabilities. So which is, it's actually about 150 trillion when we, have to pay out Medicare for the next 50 years, pay out Social Security, veterans benefit, all those things are included in that. But if you were to just take just the interest that we're going to pay, now here's the thing, there's about 340 million people in this country, not all legally, I get it. But, and then you've got only about 100 million of those that actually work, that are producing for society, right? We have children included in that, right? So, but you have about 100 million people actively producing economic benefits for our country. And again, I'm a pro-immigration guy. I'm just a legal immigration guy, just so you know. We need workers, but we need the right types, but we need to have some constraints, but we can get into that.
There needs to be a process. There needs to be a process.
No, absolutely.
We can all agree on it. And that's never going to happen. We just can't get everybody to agree on it.
Yeah. Yep. So, but it has to be done exactly the right way, and everybody should pay their fair share. I love that. Right. So, but now if you just take just the interest that we're having to pay on our debt by the actual person that pays income taxes, because only 48% of those 100 million pay income taxes. So we got over 100 million working, but only half of those, not even half, actually actively pay taxes. Most are getting tax credits and incentives of the bottom half, and they don't pay a dime, which, again, I don't think is fair. I think everybody should, and again, I don't think we should burden them with 20% taxes tomorrow that would crush them. But I think if we simply had a real move, 1%, then 2%, then 3%, then slowly walk them into being part of the solution, not the problem. And let's lift people out of poverty. Let's not hand out and tell them to stay there and, oh, woe is me, victimhood world that we live in today. But anyway, get off another chance. But it's $46,000 per year in interest per taxpayer.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So here, think about that. So do you personally feel, you listen to this podcast, do you feel you get $46,000 worth of benefits from the federal government? Does it include your state, the federal government every year? And I have to say no, right? And I pay way more than that, right? So this is the thing. We need people to get serious about this, but let's get back on task here. We know we have a spending problem. We know we have a government problem. So for our clients that have worked so hard to save, we're not trying to show people we don't need loopholes. I don't need some, oh, this is a tax haven or something. I don't need to go to the Cook Island to create some trust or go down to the Cayman Islands or Swiss bank accounts. There are 1,700 incentives in America's tax code between the 50 states and the federal government that are there. They're the rules Congress has said, hey, we want you to play by these rules. We have laid out these incentives because it drives economic benefit for our country. Therefore, they incentivize you to do things, and if you understand them, you will pay less taxes over your lifetime, and these are things we teach. And so Roth Conversion, one of the hottest tax strategies out there, right now you have a guaranteed discount that we don't always have. Now, Roth Conversions work even without this, and I can prove that by math, but right now, tax rates are lower until January 1st, 2026. What is known as the Trump tax cuts, actually the Tax and Job Act of 2017, expires the personal discount on marginal tax rates. And by the way, the brackets shrink as well. So about half of the people, dual income, middle income Americans that are in the 24% tax bracket today, over half of those people, when 24% goes to 28%, that is the law. But over half the people in 24%, Adam, a lot of people don't know this, a lot of advisors don't know this, will go to 33%. They won't go to 28%.
Why is that?
Because where the bracket is. And I'll send you the brackets. So the bracket gets cut. A dual income family earning about $350,000 today. So just think about a chiropractor and his wife, maybe a nurse at the hospital. They might be earning $300,000 to $400,000 today. White collar professionals, or a guy who owns a construction company or a plumbing company, and they're because of standard deduction so big as well, which gets cut. They're in a 24% tax bracket if they're joint filers today. They actually go to 33%, not 28%. If you look at the brackets the IRS has published for 2026. And so when we share this with clients, hey, would you rather pay 24% now or 33% later of a bigger amount? And therefore, the Roth conversion typically makes sense. And I'm a huge advocate. Like I said, I teach a lot of advisors. I actually did a podcast with another advisor not that long ago, another Adam, who's a good friend. And we kind of debated this thing of Roth conversions, and he likes the idea for smaller clients or smaller net worth or lower tax bracket folks, but he's struggling with the bigger ones. And I'm just like, look, it's just math. I mean, same thing with like life insurance, right? Cash value life insurance. A lot of people like to use it. A lot of people don't, and people don't understand. I'm like, look, it's just math to me. If I put this much money in life insurance and your kids get this much, or we leave it where it is, and then there's an estate tax, which is coming, and your kids get less, which one do you want me to do? I don't, you tell me, client, and I'll do it. So we don't ever talk really product. We talk concept and strategy, and then we let the math work the problem out. And then we simply share the results of the math and say, hey, look, we can save you X by doing strategy A. We can save you Y if we add on strategy B. We can actually save you Z if we add on strategy C, or we can stay the course and this is what you'll pay. What would you like us to do? And so it's very simple. Let the math show the path so that people understand what they're doing. And for some clients, they want to benefit their children or even their grandchildren. And again, every client is different. And we can design strategies to do that. So not to get too deep in it, but one great strategy is called a CLAT. It is a charitable lead annuity trust. Now, there's many ways to set these up, so I don't want to get people confused, and do not do this without talking to somebody who knows what they're doing.
All right.
An attorney, which we are not.
Yeah. But with a charitable annuity leads trust, people don't realize there is what's called a discount rate, Adam. Basically, we get to discount the assets that we donate to this charity, giving us a higher tax deduction. That rate is set by the IRS every month. It's called the 75/20 rate. Currently, it's about 5.4%. When the Fed raises or lowers interest rates, which we know they're going to do probably next year aggressively, we don't know exactly when, but when they do, there will be an amazing opportunity to utilize this strategy because that rate will go down as well. So during COVID, in April of 2020, that rate went all the way down to a historical low of 0.4%, which increased drastically the charitable deduction you got for pushing dollars into one of these type of vehicles. Now, again, this is not a strategy. This is not tax advice. This is not investment advice, not legal advice. This is simply making you aware there are probably multiple strategies. We have 120 of them that we layer together to help people that have done the hard work, saved up millions of dollars in IRAs, to help them discount the cost of moving those accounts to tax-free accounts like Roth IRAs. And the massive benefit on the other side is the Roth IRA. I like to call it a freedom account. I'm wearing a flag right now. It's Memorial Day weekend we're going into. I love freedom. I love liberty, right? I'll be marching. We're the title sponsor of a patriotic parade in downtown Omaha here this weekend. I'll be marching in that parade tomorrow morning. I love freedom and liberty. I'm thankful for the veterans, my father and my brother, both who've served in live combat, for their service, and thanks to any veterans listening to this. But listen, the Roth IRA gives you freedom. You do not have to take distributions if you don't want. Therefore, you can keep amassing and growing those assets if that's what you want. You can take distributions, and if you follow all the rules, they can be 100% tax-free. And you can pass those assets on to your beneficiaries. Now, not talking about estate tax, but income-wise, tax-free. These are amazing benefits. And by the way, you could leave those to grandkids and give your grandkids a Roth. And then we can show you, by the way, how to put that in a structure using another special trust where we can create a stretch IRA when those were eliminated. So we can actually have your kids grow those dollars for 20 years in a Roth IRA, potentially tax-free. Again, you don't know what you don't know, man. We say this all the time on our radio show and our TV show we do up here in the Midwest, but there are so many strategies people are not aware of. And this is why we think it's so important and people ask me, why do you teach other advisors? Aren't they your competition? I'm like, man, I live in a world of abundance. There are more clients that need our services than I could ever serve. I don't take on clients personally anymore. We had a guy come in this past week, net worth well over $100 million. And, well, what if I want you to be my advisor? I'm like, well, you don't want that. I promise you. I'm on the road a lot. I travel a lot. I do a lot of speaking engagements. You want a team of advisors, and that's what we offer. We have 12 advisors on our team right now, and we're growing that. But all my clients get 3 to 5 advisors on what we call pods. So they got multiple brains thinking all the time to help strategize. And my guys, now every office is different. I get that. But my office, we don't see clients on Friday because every Friday, in fact, when I'm done this podcast with you, I'll walk into what's called case review meeting, and all the advisors have to present anything they plan on presenting to a client next week. Any of the meetings that are scheduled next week with any clients, whether it's a review or a new prospective client, they have to present it to all the advisors. And then we're like the wolf's den, man. We're picking each other apart, like, ha, you missed one. And so iron sharpens iron, and that's how we put together collaborative work, and that's so important. And I know you've got CPAs you partner with right there by your office. You've got a couple attorneys. I learned all this listening to your podcast, by the way. This is so important. People understand whoever you're going to work with an advisor, they're kind of the quarterback, if you will. And you got to have all the pieces on the team listening to the quarterback, and so they run the right route. So if your estate attorney, your elder attorney, your business attorney, if they're not the same person, they got to be collaborating and talking to your CPA or tax preparer and your financial advisor. If all three of these are not cohesively understanding the strategies, one can do something that can harm the other. And it's critical people understand what true holistic advice is, which is why we always say work with a fiduciary-based independent advisor and make sure we understand that, hey, everybody should be doing what's in their best interest. A lot of great advisors at all the firms we mentioned earlier, by the way. I started my career at the Wirehouse world. But most of those guys still work off what's called a suitability recommendation, not a fiduciary level. There's disclosure here. Everybody should be doing. Most advisors are great people and want to do great service. There are a few bad apples in every industry.
I wanted to jump in. I wanted to talk to you about something that's really important. I got a couple things, actually, and I'll just kind of fire through them a little bit. It's funny that you brought up Adam. I thought about this the other day. I don't know Adam that well, but I was listening to his take on the possibilities why Roth Conversions isn't efficient. And of course, some of those factors were missing. Medicare surcharges, future estate tax, which is going down to, when it sunsets, it's $6 million per person. Now it's $12 million, right? So my thought on this, I sat down with a family that had about $23.8 million about 2 weeks ago. And one of the reasons they came in is they went to one of the classes that I was doing here at one of the libraries. And they said, we just did a $3.8 million Roth conversion all at once. And now we're not sure that that was the best thing to do. So on that $3.8 million, they paid $680,000. And they were already well above that Medicare rate. They were in that, that third tier of Medicare surcharges. The way that I explained it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might have had some other feedback. I knew going into 2026 that we're looking at anywhere from 4 to 5% increases in the different tax brackets. So if you just multiply that 3.8 million by 4%, to me that's a savings right away, right? I mean, looking at it that way. So, sitting down with this family and trying to get them to understand that. And then that's number one. The other issue that you run into sometimes that maybe you can speak to, so I'll give you two in a row here. You actually have this idea. For me, I have three items that I look at when we're trying to consider a Roth conversion. The first one is the savings that you're going to see as the family that's sitting in front of me, right? You're going to see this much in savings. Now, if you reinvest your dividends, which we haven't even talked about, you reinvest your RMD, and now you have to pay taxes on the capital gains. So you have a separate number for that, which usually adds up to a pretty hefty amount that's being saved. And you and I both know, though, the heftiest amount is the one that goes to the kids, right? Because it saves them hundreds of thousands of dollars in potential taxes to them, because we all know what the government does and what the IRS does. They're crooks. So now they found a way to double dip. When you die, rather than having a stretch IRA or being able to stretch that out over the rest of your life, now all of a sudden, these kids only have 10 years to take the money out. And they're smart, right? Just like with the RMD and pushing that off, everybody thinks, oh, great. Well, not really, because the IRS doesn't go away. It's the Immortal Revenue Service. So they know the longer they push it, the higher the likelihood that tax rates are going to be higher when the RMD comes out. So with the kids, they're adding.
And that 10th year, exactly. In that 10th year, it's all got to come out. And, our modeling
couldn't even get clarity on that, right? We couldn't even get clarity on whether they had to take one out for 10 years, like every year they had to take it out, or they could wait till the 10th year to take it out. When this first happened, when the Secure Act first passed.
Oh, yeah, we went back and forth 3 times. Yeah.
We didn't know. So I guess my question to you is, what's some of the feedback you would have given that family, the first family that I talked about? And what is some of the feedback you give to people? Because this just happened as well. People that are actually probably spending the RMDs, and maybe they don't have the direct, family that they're leaving any money to. Maybe they don't have kids, maybe they don't have nephews, nieces, whatever it might be. What kind of advice do you give them based on, looking at that savings, right? It's not as hefty if we're not concerned about where the money gets left to. I mean, what kind of feedback do you give for that?
Well, you're absolutely right. The tax brackets increase. So the nuclear option, as we call it. So we have that actually as a plan for a lot of our higher net worth clients that have still. So we do conversions over 6 to 8 years typically, right? We're trying to maximize the efficiency of the conversion. However, we build a backup plan, which is when legislative changes come. So we're trying to squeeze everything we can in the brackets that are available for us today. But when you have clients that have such a big amount in that account, like that $3.8 million you just brought up, that you're right. Next year, they could have done a chunk of that at a lower bracket, right? So they got to get a little bit more in each of the brackets up, saving them probably $50,000, $70,000 in taxes on that conversion. So what we do is we actually show them a max plan for this year and then do the nuclear option next year. Now, we also have it on the quick draw. We are ready because elections have consequences. If by some reason, of course, this is what's proposed, it's on the White House website, what is proposed for January of next year, if the Biden were to get reelected, and it's 50-50 or something right now, whatever it is, and they were to have control of both houses of Congress, you can expect higher tax rates in 2025. So you would want to do those conversions this year and be no problem. So I would counsel people, look, it's not that big a deal in the greater scheme of things, that kind of net worth. It's probably a good thing you got it over there because now you have freedom. 5-year clock on that conversion is counting, et cetera. So what I would counsel those folks is, are there strategies, and there are there strategies you would like us to help implement to reduce that tax burden you just paid? In other words, if I could shave off $100,000 of that $600,000 plus tax bill you save between now and the end of the year with some other planning strategies, would that benefit you? And of course, if the client says yes, and then we get into the conversation of how those things can happen. And so one of the questions I always ask clients or prospective clients, or my guys do and gals do, is, hey, do you mind if I ask, is philanthropy part of your life? Are you charitably inclined? Do you give to anybody anybody. I don't care if it's $250, to the local Red Cross when something happens. You live in a storm area, really donating, or you're tithing like I do to a church or synagogue or mosque or whatever it may be, or you're giving just in, like we bless over 20 charities here locally. It's kind of in our DNA. We love to give back. And so I'm writing checks every month somewhere. And I love doing that. I mean, yesterday I actually had breakfast with the guy who runs a charity. He's like, you cannot imagine what your donations alone. I was his first donor when they started this charity a couple of years ago, and we now give them a decent check every month to support their operation. He goes, and it's with law enforcement. And my dad's a retired cop, so we support this. It's called, it's basically Hold the Line. It works for law enforcement here locally. It's awesome. They're going national. But anyway, if clients are charitably inclined, then we can immediately go to work with a couple of simple strategies that you're probably already aware of, like donor advised funds, things like that. Accelerate some of their donating forward to mitigate the tax bill they've already paid this year. Even if they're not, though, I simply ask, well, let me ask you a question. This is your pie of stuff. This is your stuff, right? And I just draw a line in there, and about 40% of it, and go, if you happen to pass away tomorrow, this chunk goes to the government, this chunk to your beneficiaries, your kid. Do you mind if I move this line that's on your kids, so that 60% maybe that's going to the kids, if I move that to 70%? Do you mind if I just move that line where your kids get 70%, and then I draw a line in the IRS portion and I cut that in half? But if I give half the IRS portion to a charity, do you mind if I do that? Your kids are going to get more. So, but do you mind if I'll even pick charity if you're not charitably inclined? They're like, well, no, I wouldn't mind that. Great. You're charitably inclined. And now we get to work on a little bit more advanced planning and help them understand, because one of my core values here is stewardship, right? So we have SMART values for our firm, and stewardship's our first value. I am trying to help my clients be better stewards of the money, and I have no problem paying the IRS, paying the government for my fair share. They do provide services for me, right? I get services from the government. I just don't think at the level I'm paying. But anyway, so if the government was a better steward, I have no problem. So I'm simply helping my clients understand why these incentives are in the tax code. In other words, why are charities tax-free? Because they take the burden off of the government. They provide amazing services. Like we have an awesome charity here in town called Open Door Mission that we write big checks to, and we support quite a big projects for them every year. They help homeless people here. The government's not having to do it because the charity is stepping in and doing the service, right? So charities are much more efficient. 90 cents of every dollar typically you give to a good charity goes to the actual person that's in need, right? The benefit. And that's what people need to understand in society. We don't need the government trying to provide all these services, because now you're adding lifelong employees, pensions. We don't need any of that. Just let society provide, and people will. People are innately good, right? And I think they would. So we want to continue, I believe, until if you want to get on the other side of this, we get debts under control, we should incentivize more charitable giving. I mean, like increase, not just dollar deduction, maybe give 2-for-1 deduction. And then the government wouldn't have to provide these services. And we would get, anyway, I can solve all these problems through math and logic, but in the political world, that's not allowed.
It used to be, and I've talked to somebody about tithing and things like that, and I feel like it's sometimes not enough to just tithe to your church, because if you really think about it, history has shown us that most of these charities, most of these things that happen with the other charities that we might give to, went through the church, right? So now you're giving 10% to the church, right? Before your harvest, right? That's what the Bible says, right?
Yep.
In my mind, like you, being charitably inclined, I look at that as a responsibility and as a tithe as well, because where are these other organizations going to get it now? It's not the church handing them out. Something else that's interesting about this whole thing, and I don't know how you counsel people, but normally when we're in this situation where we've got these multimillionaires, where we're trying to create these tax sheltered strategies, right? The big problem that I run into, and this is, again, me at a high level, which is why I love talking to you, because you can be somebody at that high level, but one of your real strengths is being in the weeds and knowing these strategies. I have a team that knows a lot of these strategies, so I lean on it a little bit more. But the reality is, what my feeling is, when it comes down to the super affluent, the multi-million dollar families, it's all under the same issue that they have. They don't spend any money. They've institutionalized, and I use the word institutionalized, and I don't mean it to be an antagonistic term, but if you think about a prisoner who's been in jail for 30 years,
I think of Red from Shawshank Redemption. Can't squeeze a drop unless the guard tells me so.
Right. So now, 30 years later, you put them back out into society. And where do a majority of them end up? Back in prison again, because it's just too much. So these families, think about that, especially the multi-millionaires. They spent their entire lives working, following that schedule of putting it away, making sure we have enough. And now you look at them and you tell them, do you want to leave 15, 20 million to your kids? Is there anything you want to do? Well, we have a pretty modest lifestyle. Well, that's not what we asked, right? So many of the people in our industry focus on the performance, the returns. And to your point, in an IRA, why in the heck would we still be having high double-digit returns when 3/4 of that could potentially end up going to the IRS anyway? So people look at us like we have three heads when we say, number one, why are you getting these high returns? Number two, why aren't you spending more money? It's completely the opposite of what they normally hear, because in my mind, you've been institutionalized to believe that you shouldn't spend more. So for us,
hey, the go-go years are real. We talk about that all the time, like the first 7 to 10 years when you're ready to retire. If there's things you want to do, I mean, I've arm wrestled people literally at the table to get them to spend their own darn money. And I've booked vacations for people in the room. I've booked cruises for people in the room. I've actually got an Airbnb account set up for a couple. I have a sweet couple up here, and I love them to death. And they were just so tight. I don't know if we can. Yes, we will not let you run out of money. But let me tell you, you're not going to have because listen, day one of retirement, you have the best mental health, physical health, and financial health of your retirement, period. And they're going to decline from there. So if you want to do stuff, now is the time. But most financial professionals, let's just say, oh, we got to grow. I mean, I had a lady, unfortunately, $4.5 million or so. Husband passed away, unfortunately, early. Widow, has 3 kids. All the kids are doing fine. They all have advanced degrees. They're all making hundreds of thousands a year. And she's just like, and her advisor, which is one of the big wire, would not let her take any money out. She's like, I want to take a trip. He goes, I don't think you should. We got to be careful. And I showed her simple math and income plan. I was like, I can give you $250,000 a year, and you can live to 110. I can't run you out of money. I can't do it. And so, especially with treasuries, I mean, guaranteed return from the federal government at 5% on some things. And so she was crying when I told her it was okay to spend money. And not only that, she was able to take not only herself on a trip, 2 girlfriends that were not as fortunate financially, and pay for it. And she was like, I say, do it, bless them. And she's like, I can't believe I was able to do that. And so now every year she comes in with pictures of her trips, and it gives me the biggest hug. And I don't have any clients that I just pop into conference rooms now. I don't have any clients really on my own anymore. I just can't. But I pop into as many meetings as I can each day. And the hugs that we get when we let people know, to your point, Adam, listen, you got to stop what you've been taught. Let me show you. We will not let you run money, and we'll give the money to your kids that you want them to get. But I mean, my net worth is skyrocketed, and I never thought I'd have this kind of net worth. I mean, let's face it. And so my estate plan right now, it doesn't go to my kids. It goes to charities, the bulk of it. My kids will get enough. And then Warren Buffett has a great quote. I'm paraphrasing here, but I want to give my kids, when he announced he's giving his whole fortune away, I want to give enough to my kids that they can succeed in life, but nothing more. You know what I mean? They don't need all.
You want to give them enough to do something, but not enough to do nothing, right? That's
right. So I'd rather give my money and be a good steward to charities, et cetera. And as my kids mature, I may give them more. Every year I review it and my net worth and all that. So anyway, but yeah, you just got to be focused. You got to be planning, and you got to work with competent professionals who are proactive in nature.
So one other thing I wanted to talk about, I know you got to jump off, and I've got another Zoom as well. We don't get enough time together, brother. I can't wait to get out there and see you and do one of these masterminds with you, just because, like you said, iron sharpens iron. One of the things that I want to talk to you about, though, was this idea that you said, Medicare B is up again. You're probably aware of this. Last year, the first time that they actually lowered Medicare Part B, now we're at 179 or something like that. Last year was 154. But the reality is that had been the first time in like 11 to 12 years, I think it was, that we had seen a lower Medicare Part B cost. But the interesting thing about the inflationary aspect of the surcharges continuing to increase, the 110-year average in inflation in this country is 3.27%. We can argue all day about that, and not you and I can't argue, but people can argue with us about that. But we know that does not include gas or food in that equation most of the time. Yeah. Right. So the idea here is The Medicare, they've set everything up perfectly. They've pushed back the RMD age. They've pushed the Medicare surcharges up. And what people don't realize is that's a very powerful number, that's 6 to 7%, because that is double the rate of inflation in our country. So
yeah, so
you're losing automatically.
Well, that's what I need people to understand. Your Medicare costs double every 9.5 years. All right, that's the rate they're going up. So if you have a 30-year retirement, that's 3 doubles. So even if you're at the low end and you're paying $175 right now, right? That's $350. That's $700. That's $1,400 a month you'll be paying a single person to access Medicare. $2,800 a month for a married couple 30 years from now. That their Social Security is gone. That's what I'm saying. And for clients that are at the top end where it's $1,200 a month, double that 3 times. And now you understand why we have clients and we show them at age 90, you won't get Social Security. You'll owe the government $800 a month. That is a fact.
We talk a lot about SSA 44, and the 8 qualifying life events that they can have to fill out this form. It's just amazing to me, and you know this already, that first year that they're retired, they look back 2 years at their income, right? The Social Security Administration. They get away with robbery every year because retirement is a qualifying life event. So all of these families for that first year of retirement that are paying double or triple for their Medicare Part B
don't know they can file. Yep.
Right. I mean, it's robbery. That's what it equates to. They should not have to pay it, and they do. So where does all that money go? It just feels like the only people that are attacked in this country are the retirees that did really well. And by the way, the interesting part to me is those are most of the ones that are going out and voting. And they don't even realize it. They don't even realize these things are happening. So,
well, and again, that's why you got to be proactive in your planning, understand the things you don't know. So, yeah, look, we got to jump out of here, man. This has been fun. We'll try to do it again in the future here. And congratulations on your 50th episode on your podcast, bro. That's a nice.
There was only one person I wanted on it with me. I dropped a hint last week. I said, God, I hope he can do it. But we can't thank you enough. I'm sure our families enjoyed this as well. And obviously, always here for you. Not that you need me, but always here for you if you have anything to bounce off. Just really appreciate you being here, brother. Nothing but the best for you, and God bless you.
All right, bro. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.